Welcome to this week's podcast of Kicking It with Kidneys with your host, Cindy Barclay. Hey, Cindy, take it away.
Hey, y'all, and welcome back to KIWK. Well, joining us today, we have BJ Simone, we have Maria Jimenez, and of course, we have Rita Williams. This is a show about people, okay, historically suppressed voices within communities of color. Now, we've been doing like a trilogy. Today is part 3, okay, on caregivers. So, BJ, what is the word on the street?
Thanks, Cindy. Well, like you said, today's Word on the Street segment concludes our 3-part series on family caregivers of dialysis patients. And today we are going to hear from Mrs. Denise Trahan. Her remarkable journey chronicles a lifetime of caregiving that she's provided for her son, who's 30 years old. He received his first dialysis at the age of 7. She's going to share with us some of the major challenges that she's faced over the years, and she's also going to tell us about a few of her personal achievements. So let's take a listen.
Welcome to Kicking It with Kidneys. We're here with Mrs. Trahan today. Her son is on dialysis, so we're going to get a different perspective regarding caregivers. Now, Mrs. Trahan, tell me a little bit about your son.
So Leonard turned 30 this January.
Okay.
He was diagnosed with cerebral palsy when he was 9 months. At that point, kidneys were functioning. So we were okay from 9 months to 7 years old. Mm-hmm. The cause of his cerebral palsy was CMV, cytomegalovirus.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So that, how that virus can affect
everything.
Can affect 5 things.
Yeah.
And it did for Leonard.
Yes,
the brain, the hearing, the vision,
mm-hmm.
and the kidney.
Kidneys, yeah.
So the kidney, he got the FSGS, got focal glomerulosclerosis of his kidney. Mm-hmm. So so right away, he was 3 when we started the care at Herman Hospital. So he got his first nephrologist when he was 3 years old.
But when did he go on dialysis? He didn't go on dialysis
until he was 7. 7 years old is when he lost his kidneys.
My goodness.
Yeah, he had
And he's 30 now?
He's 30 now. He was on peritoneal dialysis for 17 years.
Okay. So you performed that procedure yourself?
My husband and I.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I also have a daughter who is 9 years older than Leonard.
Okay.
And, she helped a lot.
Okay.
Yes. Around until she went off to school, betrayed us. left town.
That's a good betrayal.
Yes, it is. But my husband and I were his primary caregivers. How they train you on peritoneal dialysis before you leave the hospital, and then you go home. And we were so nervous. It was just unbelievably nervous. But it was determined that was the best thing for Leonard.
Right.
It was very hard sitting at the hospital, with him because of special needs, because of his cerebral palsy, just because of having to sit still.
So many problems, yeah.
And the thing with Leonard is that he's 30 years old, but he, doesn't have the intelligence. And so it's very difficult to say, be still or stop doing this. I would have to pretty much hold him and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was hard, but the hospital made it so easy. I had like a top rate nephrologist.
Okay.
She was all about the children. Uh-huh. And as you can probably guess, when he outgrew that program, broke my heart. It broke my heart because we had to choose another agency.
Okay.
So that was either DaVita I guess DaVita was what was presented to us. So we started with DaVita, and we could no longer go to Herman Hospital.
Okay.
We needed
to go to one of the centers.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we had to take the nephrologist that was there. And that's how we got Dr. Oliveira.
Okay.
But yeah.
Great guy, by the way. Great guy.
Well, good. Dr. Oliveira Sr.
That's my guy.
I love him. I love him. I love him.
Yeah.
I was at a concert, like an R&B concert, and this nurse was sitting next to me. We were just talking, and I happened to say that, something about the nephrologist that my son had. And I said it was Senior, Dr. Oliveira Sr. And she said, I know him. He is the best doctor. And I went,
everybody loves him.
So I had to tell him. And he was like, what concert was it? That's what you got to ask. But,
okay, so, all right. So what age was your son when you started with Dr. Oliveira? 18? When they transferred him from pediatrics to
adult. He was probably around 18
years old. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, so did he still stay on peritoneal dialysis, or did you? Okay, so when did he make this quick transition to hemodialysis?
It was in 2019.
Oh, that's recently.
So it was around, about 3 years ago. Three or so years ago, yes. Which was, again, devastating.
Yeah. So was he going in-center at that time as well? To in-center, or had you, or did you transfer him to?
No. So we took, Leonard had cloudy bag, infection. Took him in, and they said, we're going to call you, Miss Trahan, because this infection seems very serious. Okay. And they called me and told me that he has a fungal infection.
Wow. Those are hard to cure.
So the only thing they could do was take the catheter out.
Yeah.
And when they took the catheter out, the peritoneum had to heal and all this stuff. Yes. So they put a catheter in his groin. We were in the hospital for 2 weeks, and then we immediately came home, and Maria was here.
Okay.
So it's like we didn't spend any time. I mean, we spent a couple, the days that he was in the hospital, those 2 weeks, we spent a little bit of time having dialysis in the hospital, but quality was right here. It's like Dr. Oliveira referred us. Yeah. I think Maria had it set up so that when we come home, we would have our home dialysis.
So everything is going fine.
Yes, everything is going well. Okay. Some issues with the tummy, but as far as dialysis is concerned, everything's going well.
So how are you coping with all of this? You've been the primary caregiver. You and your spouse and your daughter have been the primary caregivers for your son for 30 years. So how are you doing?
So I do have some help. We do have some help, and I didn't mention that, but we have a lady who helps us throughout the week so that I can work, so that I can have
You work?
I do.
Tell me about that. Oh my goodness.
I'm actually on my second career.
Oh my gosh.
Let me tell you, while Leonard was very young, I decided to go back to school and get my master's. So and it's funny, I was telling somebody the other day they were complaining about all the different things they had to do. It was,
but you're Superwoman. You're Superwoman. Okay. You are Superwoman.
I just think I do what I do. And it's so funny. This guy was saying, oh, it's so hard going to school and so on. And I said, listen to me. I have a sick son. I went to school and got my master's degree, and I never stopped working because they're like, you got to stop working if you go to school. I went, and I was a mom and I was a wife. So stop, with that. But not to say, so I worked for a company for 25 years and I retired from that company, and I decided I wasn't ready to stay home. I'm not that young, but I was not ready to stay home. Yeah. So I decided to go back to work, and now I work for doing something that I work for the city of Houston, but I write exams for firefighters so that they can get promotions. That's the only way they get promoted in Houston is by taking exams. So I work for a department called classified testing.
Okay.
So it's interesting.
So you were able to really use that master's degree.
Yes, I was. Thank you for saying that. Yes, I was.
So it doesn't sound like you're having any financial challenges, though. Most of our patients, most of dialysis patients, they have a lot of financial challenges. It doesn't seem like that's the case for you.
That's not the case for us yet, but my husband and I are up in years. We're both in our 60s.
You look great, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. We're talking about retirement, and we have to think about, I know Leonard gets Medicare, gets Medicaid, but they don't pay for everything. Other therapies, they don't pay for certain medications. They don't pay for, equipment because he is in a wheelchair.
And the care, because you said you have to buy that car. The care. So you have to pay that other person to give you a break. You have to pay them.
Exactly. She's paid partly by a program that he's in, but the other part is ours. Yes. And we have to pay her in a manner that we could keep her.
Yes.
So apart all of that.
Yes. I hear people say all the time, I love you and I really want to be with you. However, I have a family to support as well. So you have to pay her competitive prices.
Exactly. Exactly. And so that's why we pay her more. So yes, you're right. We do have those expenses. Yes. And when we're thinking about retirement, we're going to have to consider all of that even more. And even the fact that Leonard, what kind of insurance is he going to have then? Because he's on his dad's insurance. And
so right now he has that extra coverage, that private health care.
Yes. And that's the only way we can have a nurse every day.
So what about medications? How are you doing with that?
So
how many medications, by the way, does
Leonard's on about 12 or so because he also has glaucoma. So we have at least 3 to 4 eye medications that he's on. He takes, supplements. one of it, what you see the small frame that he is. So,
Yes.
we're always battling his albumin, trying to get his protein. So supplements supplements are not covered under anybody. But
and they're expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, they're very expensive. So does Leonard sleep at night?
He does.
He does. Okay, so you're able to get your rest.
So the caregiver might leave around 5:30. So Leonard may be asleep from 5:30 to about 7:30, 8:30, 9:30. And then I'll get home around 6:30 or 7, depending on what time, because I have to be here during dialysis. Dialysis happens in the morning. I don't have to be here, but you know what?
You feel more
comfortable being
this is
here.
Your baby.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So I have to go to work later. So I'm there later.
Yeah.
So I will come in, and sometimes he'll stay asleep, but it's almost guaranteed that he'll wake up at 2:30 a.m. So I try, and I'm a night person, and it's very difficult for me to go to sleep with, just randomly go to sleep. So unless I'm very tired, which, lately he's had ascites. With that, he's been throwing up. So I do tend to be in his room more often.
Yeah,
and so, yes, I'm up a lot.
So do you have family support that you can get a respite every now and then? Is there family members that can come in and maybe give you a 1-week vacation or something like that?
Wouldn't that be wonderful? So, no, I don't have that.
So this is a 24/7 for you.
Yeah, and it's not, and the reason I don't have that is because part of it is probably me, because I have sisters that are good, and they were good when he was younger. My husband has family, but for some reason, we've excluded them in Leonard's care.
Because mom knows best.
And here's the other thing. My daughter, if you could grade her from, this is what my daughter does. Mm-hmm. She works in entertainment in LA, so she can work anywhere. Yes. So she'll come here, and she does that. So awesome. So she'll come and she'll take me. Like, she gave me a trip to Paris for my birthday. She does things like that. Or she'll when she comes, and she gives us lots of notice, and she says, I'm going to be here like from November this date till after his birthday in January.
Yes.
Y'all are going to do anything, plan it, do it.
That is wonderful.
That we do have that.
Yeah.
So
how do you feel as a mother? I think I'm going to answer my own question, but you've been taking care of Leonard since he was birthed up until 30. Mm-hmm. And what do you envision for his future as far as his care? Have you thought about that at all?
What did I envision? When you have a child with a challenge that you've never seen before, because my husband nor I had seen it before, it wasn't where we did have some very good resources. There are a couple ladies who are just so good and that have been in my life that have helped me resource-wise, and people that I've come into. Leonard went to a very special school, T.H. Rogers, when he started off Garden Oaks, who had a very good teacher there. So I always kept the hope that it would get, like, he would get better, or things would get better. Uh-huh. And when he lost his kidneys, that was still, we didn't really understand how that would affect all of our lives, because we right away was called for a transplant.
Yeah.
But it failed. And
so Leonard had a transplant.
Like, for a day. And the unfortunate part is that he got that transplant on the 10th. His birthday is the 12th. And they had to take it out because it started to disintegrate. It was too big or whatever. Oh my God. Yes. So that was devastating, especially to my husband. Yes, that was devastating.
So who gave him that kidney?
It was a cadaver.
A cadaver. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then the second time we were called, and I think something else happened. And this is the way I am. It's like, okay, life isn't this way. Yeah. So I need to adjust, or we need to adjust. We need to figure out, we have a son with a chronic disease. Mm-hmm. We have a son who is in a wheelchair. We have a son, and my son, and we have to
full-time care.
Yeah, so we have to have guardianship. People say to me, or especially moms, they'll say to me, "Girl, I don't know how you do it," but I said, "You're a mother. You actually do know, because this is what you would be doing."
I'm going to disagree with you on that. Not all mothers. Okay, so times have changed. Okay, times have changed. You're one of those mothers, but times have changed. Okay, not all mothers will do what you are doing for your child. Yeah, they will not make the sacrifices. My hat's off to you on that one.
Yeah, and we're blessed. We are extremely. I mean, as far as having not to do, like, our son is well enough that he can do it, and that's what I always try to tell my husband. Honey, it could be worse.
Yes.
It could be worse. And we see kids where it could be, they have feeding tubes and they have all of this stuff going on. It's like, poor Tracy, she tries her best to get Leonard like the right,
balance with
balance.
Mm-hmm.
And then something next week, there'll be something else. She goes, this is one thing after another. I said, Tracy, don't point it out. That's my life. You don't have to bring it to
you kind of bonded with your nurse.
I have.
She's a part of the family.
But the biggest part is that she's bonded with my husband. And so, I told Maria, please, let's keep her. He's a little bit more demanding because,
yes,
his thing is that I'm speaking for my son. And I have to, I of course I'm speaking for my son too, but I may be a little nicer. I'm not as, I don't, well, why is his blood pressure high?
Yeah,
and I'm like,
right.
Explain to me.
Yeah, But he has that right. And that's what people don't understand. I think people are labeled as being difficult, when you're asking the right questions. These are things that you want to know.
Yes.
So your husband should not be labeled or blackballed because he's asking the right questions.
You know what I mean? Thankfully, Tracy understands it.
Well, God is good, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we'll look forward to seeing you next week on Kicking It with Kidneys. Oh, my. She was such an inspiration. I can't sing that well, but she's a superwoman, I consider her, what that song say, I'm superwoman. She is really, really great. I enjoyed the interview. I enjoyed the environment. She is so positive till it almost made me feel like, what are you ever complaining about? So she was just really, really special. It was a pleasure being with her.
Yeah, she's an amazing person. I speak with her frequently. I mean, when I tell you anything that's happening with Leonard, she wants to know. So we do have a really, really good relationship, lines of communication are very clear. Great family. But my concern was we still didn't get that answer on what her outlook was for Leonard in the future. She said that she thought things were going to get better and they didn't. So I don't know. We can circle back to her and kind of talk with her about that.
Yeah. Well, what I got out of it, that Maria, is that in speaking to Denise, she has a strong belief. Her faith is so strong. She really believes in God. And I think that that's a part of who she is and the positiveness that she portrayed. I think it had a lot to do with the fact of her beliefs, And I think without her saying anything, but I think that her acceptance comes from what her beliefs are. So I think she's going to do her part and leave it to that supreme being to do his part.
Well, and she surrounds herself with people that are positive as well. I've had the opportunity to meet her husband and meet their their provider that they have for Leonard. Same thing. They have the same attitude, a real delightful attitude, the can-do attitude. So, yeah, she surrounds herself with positivity and things are going to work out, or we're going to figure out a way to get it done.
In a perfect world, she had a lot of resources. Did you guys notice that? Mm-hmm. In a perfect world, but this woman is very energetic. She doesn't have any financial needs right now, but she's saying that later on, that her and her husband are getting older. She basically have resources that the average person does not have. And I guess in listening to that, when we talked about, I think we had the first patient that we had, the mother was situated because she had a pension in episode, I think it was 10. Okay. She had a pension that she was receiving, which no longer exists. So they're still running backwards. And she had a supported family. Now, the second person that we had was Mrs. Ames. Am I not correct? Where she was caring for her husband and basically did not have a lot of resources and she needed help herself. So what do you guys think about that? I mean, the difference, we have 3 different analogies here, 3 different scenarios, but yet
I think she had 30 years to do it. She had definitely a lot more time than the others. I mean, her son was born sick. So she said the hospital was great. And especially with children, the resources are out there for children. So she's definitely had 30 years to develop that.
And Maria's right. When the child is born, you kind of get a social worker assigned to you, which that's probably what she had done at the hospital. So they started the paperwork right away. They knew at one point they were going to need guardianship over this child. So they started.
Why do they get guardianship? I mean, what's the purpose of that?
Because Leonard's not able to make his own decisions. He will never be.
So why do they have to
legally, it's for legal reasons. Because after he ages out,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I'm assuming that they probably have their daughter as secondary or maybe the third person on there for guardianship, because like she did mention, they are getting older. Leonard's going to outlive them. So that guardianship will probably transfer to the daughter, and the daughter will continue. I mean, she's very active in his life as it is as a caregiver now.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think, and I want to commend you, Cindy. I think that those were excellent questions that you asked her, because from her answers, you really get a universal picture of what all caregivers are facing, not just caregivers of dialysis patients, whether it's Alzheimer's or diabetes or whatever. What you see with her is this amazing resilience.
Yes.
That no matter what obstacles they encounter, they find a way. And that's what she said. She goes, well, this is the way I am. That's not how we thought it was going to be. So now I have to change my mindset and think of it this way. One of the things I thought was really interesting is, as we were talking about resources that are available, is she said how Medicaid don't pay for equipment. They don't pay for supplements. They don't pay for other types of therapies. And I think that's kind of eye-opening for people who are beginning their journey as caregivers, because I know I would think, well, I have insurance, I have Medicare, I have Medicaid. Surely it's going to pay for all of these other things that are requirements or what you would definitely think of necessity. So that was kind of eye-opening for me.
So Rita, let me ask you something. So is there no support for people that have nothing basically other than provider services, to where the Medicaid sends in something? Because that can be quite tedious. If you're working and then you have to come home, it can be quite tedious.
Oh, yeah. And I think a lot of patients will qualify for Medicaid. We talked about this last time, if the resources aren't high. So yes, they can get a provider that way, but really, insurance doesn't pay for a home health provider. I mean, to come out and like the care that Leonard gets, no, or some of our other seniors like Mr. Ames needed some of that care. But she told us because of the resources they had, they didn't qualify for Medicaid.
So you would have to get something called that long-term care disability or something like that, which is another insurance and another cost.
And that's another cost out of pocket. That's all out of pocket. It's not covered under your regular Medicare, that $170.10 they're paying now. No, that's an additional, amount of money. And they have limits as well. So they still may not cover the home health provider. They still may not cover some of the equipment. I know that Ms. Trahan and them pay for a lot of the stuff out of their pocket. So do a lot of other families. If they say, they won't cover a wheelchair, families somehow get together and get a wheelchair. There's places that do wheelchairs that other people don't use anymore, so things like that. But yeah, it's not an easy thing. A lot of people have the concept that I have Medicare and I qualify for Medicaid. So, I'm going to get all this stuff, but that's not true. That is not true. Your insurance is not going to pay, like BJ said, is not going to pay for those supplements, and they do get expensive. So there is resources out there in the community. Just depends on what community you are at. That does have like the Insure and all that kind of stuff. You can buy some of it.
Right, but that's not long term, right? So in other words, it might be available today, but maybe not next week.
Yes, you may qualify for it maybe once a year, but it's not on a continuous basis like some of the patients need the supplements.
Cindy, you mentioned something when you were talking to Ms. Trahan about her getting help and providing those competitive wages.
Yes. So when you're looking at dialysis patients, so Rita, tell me if I'm wrong on this. BJ just asked a question. Most dialysis patients are not white collar workers. You know what I'm trying to say? And they're minorities, okay, yes. Which means that they do your first line. You know what I'm trying to say? They do the jobs more so domestic, the majority of them that I've met. So therefore, if you're making $20 an hour, okay, how can you afford to pay a caregiver that extra? I mean, that's just really tedious on the family, but nobody is looking at that. That's, you know, it's not important. When do you become important, Rita? When am I important enough?
I'm always important.
Okay. I just want to know.
Everybody's always important. Okay. But sometimes we don't have, like you say, the means for people to see us as that important. But I mean, I don't know. Sometimes if the patient goes in hospital, sometimes the insurance will cover for home health to come out, but it may be for a limited time.
Oh, it's
they only have short term. It could be 6 weeks and then it's over. It could be as short as 4 weeks and it's over. But it's only so many times you get so many visits. I think one insurance covers like 60 visits, but that's for a whole year. It could be a lifetime. It just depends on the insurance. Yeah, you may come home with some service, but it's not going to stay long term.
Okay, so now here's kind of the back door, Rita. There are people, and I've worked with caregivers who know how to work the system. And there is a way of working the system, but you have to almost spend as much time educating yourself because the family member, I said, they're getting ready to exceed what the insurance will pay, but they said there's what do you call it, Rita, an appeal
Yes,
process.
You can appeal. But so it's a lot of legwork, and you've got to get a lot of signatures, and you have to have the knowledge. And a lot of families don't have that.
And they get frustrated. They get frustrated. And that's what it's designed to do. That's why all these layers, that's what they're designed to do, to confuse people. You know?
And a lot of those appeals get denied. You know, they do because you didn't do something right or you just didn't word it correctly. But that's not common knowledge and people don't give that out. Insurance is not going to say, well, Rita, you can appeal. Of course not. They're not going to say that unless you get someone at a social worker at a hospital or a care facility that says, oh, no, we're going to appeal this and we're going to, they know the verbiage. So, but it's not common. It's not common for our patients. And like Ms. Barkley said, sometimes patients just get tired. Families just get tired and say, we're just going to do it on our own until maybe somebody says, hey, have y'all ever tried to appeal this? Or like you say, there's a back way to this. Let's try
this. They don't know that. That's not presented
That's
to them.
Not common knowledge.
Yeah, that's not common. No, that's not presented to them. And I think we need to do more education for people when people make inquiries to kind of give them more information about how we should, this should be processed. They'll just, whatever anyone tells them, they'll say, okay, and they'll just move on. They don't have the initiative to.
Yeah, and insurance makes it hard. It makes it hard. I mean, they're not in the business of giving us money we think they're there to cover what we, if we're sick or something. That's the pharmacy we have. We say, I have Medicare, I have, my Blue Cross Blue Shields or whatever, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to have to pay anything out of pocket because I'm covered. I'm doing the right thing. Well, guess what?
It's long term. You see, insurance is, in my opinion, and I've been dealing with them for quite some time, but anything long term that's going to cost them, you're not going to get that for too long. You're not going to get that too long.
Well, they hope you don't use it. That's what. That you're not here long enough to max out your long term.
It's the fighters. Maria, I have a question. When she was talking about Tracy coming into the home, what does Tracy do?
So she's actually the dialysis nurse. So they've got the equipment and the supplies set up in their house. Mm-hmm. And Leonard has a room. That's his bedroom. It's got all his other medical, Hoyer lift, all that other stuff in it. And it includes his dialysis equipment. So Tracy has been assigned to Leonard Trahan for quite some time. They've built that rapport. They've built that relationship. And like Ms. Denise says, when Tracy is there, she's still there because she just feels comfortable. But especially when Tracy goes on vacation, like she has to, sometimes there's a coverage nurse, but mom is there just to make sure everything is okay. So Tracy is the heart for dialysis over there with Trahans.
And what she said, that she has a team, they have this teamwork, and she bonded with the husband who, as she said, may be a little bit more difficult, but that's something you mentioned, Cindy. And I just wrote that down when you said proactive caregivers shouldn't be labeled difficult,
right?
Just because they're trying to make sure that their loved one's getting the best care.
Yeah, which is really great, because if they're proactive, then you're passing on education to generations or to others in the household. You see what I'm saying? So I'm glad that Tracy's there, and I'm glad he's the type of, because it keeps the caregivers as a team, it keeps us on our toes as well, because they're asking the right questions, and they know they've got to be up on their game. I wanted to go back to that $10 an hour, that $20 an hour issue that I was talking about. So you would think that if somebody's making $20 an hour, that basically we should be able to do more with provider services. Because what I've noticed too, BJ, you kind of mentioned that sometimes there are people that can work the system. Now, I've seen situations, not in dialysis, because we know that that's a legitimate. We can't say you can have 60 visits when we know that you need 156 because you're going to be dialyzed 3 times a week. So that's not a home health care issue. Dialysis is not home health care. The designation may be in the home, but it's not a home health care issue. But I've seen some situations to where you have family members that basically are getting paid to be providers. To me, that's a major concern, because again, what type of mechanisms do they have in place, Rita, to make sure to check on these people to make sure that that's legitimate? Yeah, that's the other spectrum of things.
And that can be great sometimes because they're already doing it. So yeah, they should get paid for it. And if there's a way to do it, great. But sometimes there is people that do abuse it. And I don't know what the spot check is like unless somebody reports it. Like, say we go to the home and we see that, the patient, the home is a mess. And you're like, what? Isn't so-and-so supposed to be your provider, come in to, help you clean and prepare your meals and all that stuff? What's going on with that? I don't think they spot check, especially since COVID, to tell you the truth. I think they haven't been in the field. I know they're coming back out into the field because I know they need to come out and recertify and all that kind of stuff. But you're right, BJ, people do know how to play the system. But I've seen plenty of patients that it is maybe a sibling that is their provider and does do a good job. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They do. And like always, you're going to have some bad apples as well.
And I think, let me clarify, when I say play the system, I'm not necessarily saying people who abuse the system. I'm saying that there are people who find a way to get all the equipment. Now, if that means going to, like you said, services that will recycle equipment after they've been used, going to hospice, these are people who simply don't say no. And they find a way to get. But that's a resilience that a lot of people don't have.
And that's true. You're right. Then, so they're just resourceful savvy. That's it. Somebody has told them something and they follow up. And I think like Ms. Trahan, she has so much knowledge. I mean, and sharing with us and doing this podcast, that's great because she's sharing some of those resources some of us don't even know about. I may know some, but Miss Barkley, I don't know if you know all that stuff, BJ, but that's how the word gets out. Hey, I had a child or I have a husband, and this is the way I was able to get some of this equipment or some of the supplements that I needed. It's just knowing your resources and sharing resources. I mean, if I know a resource, why wouldn't I share it with you guys? It's just getting, like you said, getting the word out.
But I think it's something also that by having all of these 3 very different caregivers. Maria said something in our last podcast about I don't think she said in the podcast, but Miss Ames was one of the first ones you guys had that didn't have private insurance, or there was something unique about her.
She was one that we knew about several months before because she called and was adamant about trying to get the service for her husband. Insurance initially said no.
Right. So that, again, I think she's a good person to say that you may not have these up front, but you just are persistent. So each one got what they needed, but they came from different directions.
And another thing we need to address, is it more expensive to have dialysis at home? I understand that everybody can't have it, but when you look at it, I don't think that it is. And I think that's a propaganda because, again, they're looking at whether you're Medicare primary or non-primary. So Rita, as a social worker, would you say that it was more expensive to have dialysis at home? If you have private insurance, of course, now Medicare does not pay for a nurse to come to the home. So that's already been established.
Right. Okay. For me personally, I think that the benefits are better for the patients.
Right.
Being at home, being comfortable. And I think
less infection.
And infections
their
and
own
stuff
environment.
Right.
Teaching,
Yeah.
So they thrive better.
They thrive better, especially during COVID for our patients. You know what I mean? The best example that we could have shown everybody why dialysis at home works. I mean, our patients weren't getting sick because they weren't exposed to all that.
Yeah, to a lot of things.
So they did a whole lot better during the COVID, since COVID, when COVID started, and we didn't know what it was going to look like, what was going to happen. It was great for our patients. They did a whole lot better at home.
Well, Cindy, one of the last things that I wanted to say that was very unique about Ms. Trahan is the caregiver identity.
Okay.
Because caregivers spend so much time, their own personal time and money and resources. This was a woman who was able to go to school, have a career, retire from that career, start a new career. So, being a caregiver, to me, I was listening to her, and I remember when she said, this person was complaining. And she goes, listen, I have a kid, and I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I go to school. So I think that she really is remarkable in that she is able to fulfill her role as a caregiver, and yet
a mother,
carve out a part of herself. But the other problem, because so many caregivers do, just that caregiver role consumes them, that when they're no longer in that role, they don't know what to do. And,
she won't have that problem.
No, she will not have that problem.
Okay, guys. Well, this kind of concludes the end of our series on caregiving. And BJ, you have some information? Our listeners on the website.
We're talking about things that caregivers can, resources. I know certainly for anyone who is taking care of a family member who has been in the military, if you're taking care of a veteran, the VA does have a caregiver support program. They target information for family caregivers because every community has different resources that are available. If I were going to look, your first point might be if it's a senior center or a community center. Oftentimes they can be a good network to at least get you started on finding out where resources are. And if you've exhausted that, then certainly contact us at Kickin with Kidneys, and that's KIWK. Drop the G. KickinItWithKidneys.com. Contact us. I mean, you've got Maria and Rita and Cindy, and certainly I will do what we can do to connect you with the right people.
All right. Well, we thank you so much for joining us on KIWK, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode. It's going to be a good one. Take care.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Kickin' It with Kidneys with your host, Cindy Barclay. See you next week. The views expressed on this podcast are educational and opinion-based. These are not medical doctors.